Well, we are in the middle of, or in week 2 of, I should say, our Be Rich series. And Be Rich, again, as I said earlier, it's our month-long campaign of just extravagant generosity towards our community and towards the people that are in our place, in our community. This is our home, and we want to make it a better place. It's based in this idea found in a conversation between Paul and Timothy. When Paul was trying to explain to Timothy what he thought the community, the Jesus-following community, should look like, he said these words. He said, "Command those who are rich in this present world," and again, like I said last week, that's if you have more than you need, by definition, globally, you're rich. "Those who are rich in this present world to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share." That's it. So we've been trying to figure out, as Jesus followers, what it looks like for us to be generous and willing to share. How do we find kind of a way to do that in our community? And I said this last week, and I mean it. This season makes me really happy. This is one of those seasons of time in life that it brings me a lot of joy, and I'm encouraged by it. And so I really, I'm excited about this. I was trying to explain that to someone on the outside of things who isn't part of our church or anything. I said, this just makes me really happy. And they said, how on earth does being generous, like how is it giving your money away makes you happy? And they're not quite Jesus followers, and that's okay. But they're like, how on earth does that make you happy? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And it got me thinking a little bit about happiness. And I know in church, usually we use the word joy versus happy, and I don't usually get caught up in that dichotomy because I've been around the church long enough to know that if I say, well, I don't have happiness, but I have joy, that's just my way of saying I'm really miserable, but I still follow Jesus. And I don't know why we do that. I'm not really sure why we do that. So I'm just going to let that go. But it is interesting to me to think about happiness because I've said this phrase before, and I wonder whether you've said this phrase too. I thought I knew what would make me happy. Have you said this? I thought I knew what would make me happy. I thought I knew exactly what I needed to do, but I did not. And maybe you've pursued some things in your life that you were convinced were going to bring you joy or happiness or whatever else, and then they didn't. And you got there and it just kind of made you try to find something else. Have you ever experienced it before? I know that I have, where I was convinced what I needed to do and how I needed to do it, and then when I pursued it, it didn't take me where I wanted to go. And so through that, I learned a kind of a hard lesson that I want to share with you all this morning, and it's just simply this. You actually sow your way into happiness. And what I mean is, by sow, if you didn't grow up on a farm like I did, it means that you work every day. You plant the seed just a little bit every day. You till till that soil in your life just a little bit every day, and that, making those decisions day in and day out, being consistent, building habits, that leads you towards happiness. It's kind of like a process to get you there. Now, here's why that's difficult. Because you might make a decision now, right, that you know is the right one to make, and it's going to lead you in the long run to make your life more full of happiness, but you might not see the fruit of that immediately, right? I wish there was the magic, like, that red Staples button from those commercials years ago. Now I know, some of y'all don't know what I'm talking about, but like that, you push that button and then happiness comes. Wouldn't that be great? But it's just not how it works. It takes time. It takes time of making the right decisions over and over again to lead you into a place where you have balance in your life and it brings you happiness. And I think, if I might just say this, happiness is directly connected to peace. I think that's why Jesus talked about peace so much throughout his time in ministry, is that when you have peace, it just makes your life feel better, doesn't it? And that doesn't come easily. It doesn't. There's no better way. There's no better place on earth that this concept is illustrated than in our money. It's not. There's no better place where we have to live this out and think about this idea of sowing our way to happiness or by making right choices in the long run that lead us towards peace. There's no better place in our life that's better illustrated than our money. Let me prove it to you. Let me ask you a question. How much more money would it take to make you happy? How much more money would it take to make you happy? Now, the thing is, I don't know you, and many of you all, I've never seen your faces before. Some of you all are brand new today, and you've never even heard my voice, but I know the answer to this question for you. It doesn't matter whether you have, you're super wealthy, you're living, you're struggling at the bottom, you're somewhere in between. It doesn't matter whether you have a little bit of money or a lot of money, or you're just kind of like looking around and wishing that you had more money than the other people. The answer to this question for all of us is more than you currently have. more than you currently have, no matter where we are. This is kind of like the human realization to how money works in our lives. Is if I just had more. Have you ever said that? And like you look around at people like, how do they have that much? Do you remember that show that came out a few years ago? It was like International House Hunters or something. And like it drove me crazy to watch this. These two people in their 20s, and one of them's a part-time daycare worker, and the other one plants bugs, and their budget's like $4.6 million. And it's like, where did this come from? And you find yourself going, if I just had more than I have now, if I just had a little bit more than I have now, then I would be happy. And all of us, no matter where you come from, all of us, this is kind of the thing. If I just had more, then I'd be happy. Now, also, if you grew up in church like I did, you've probably heard a pastor stand in front of you before and say something along the lines of, money won't bring you happiness, right? Money won't bring you happiness. Let me say before I go any further, I do think there is a correlation between our money and our happiness, but it's not more. See, but when we hear that, we're tempted, like, well, let me prove you wrong. Where do I sign up for that test? Give me some, and I'll see if I can test that theory for you. If you'll just give me more, let me see. But the truth is, the correlation between our money and our happiness is not more. It's actually a word that Jesus used a lot. And Jesus was smarter than you think. This is why he talked about money so much. See, the way Jesus talked about money and helped us understand where we're really supposed to be was not more. It was this word, managed. It was this word. See, we think, I don't know what it is, it's a human condition, and maybe it's just a particularly American thing. Like I don't want to pick on the whole globe, but I've lived here long enough, I think I can say this with confidence. It is kind of an American thing that we think if we just had more, if I just had more, then I would be happy. But Jesus said that's not actually how it works. It's not more that will make you happy, it's managed that will make you happy. I'm going to tell you one of his most famous quotes about money in just a minute, but the New Testament, the Old Testament talk about money all the time, and it made me think. Right? Because even now we're squirming in our seats and we're a little uncomfortable thinking about this, right? And like, why are we talking about this in church? Well, Jesus talked about it a lot. And, the Old Testament talks about it a lot. So why is that the case? Well, again, let me just put this correlation together for you. I think money contributes to your happiness if you manage it well. Money can contribute to your happiness if you manage it well. And that's really the centerpiece of what Jesus is going to say in the scripture I'm about to read to you. See, this is Jesus' most famous one. I'm going to read the whole thing, and then I'm probably going to come back to it and explain just a few words. But when Jesus was confronted with this idea of talking to a group of people who were trying to figure out where God fit in their life, he said this phrase, these sentences, and this is recorded in the Gospel of Luke. Luke was like an eyewitness reporter. He went in and interviewed all the people who saw all the things. He said, tell me the truth about Jesus. And he put together the first investigative report that's known in history, and he did it all about Jesus. He was paid to go figure out what was going on. He was a personal friend of Paul, part of the early church. And so he said, when Jesus was confronted about, how does our relationship with God work, he said these words. And it's kind of strange that this is where he goes, but listen to what Jesus said. No one can serve two masters, which immediately we think, well, like, I don't have to worry about that, right? But masters really just means things that are in control. No one can serve two things that are in control in your life. Either you will, listen to how strong this language is, either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. So in other words, Jesus sets up this kind of like really strict dichotomy between these two things and uses incredibly strong language and says you can't have two people in charge in your life. You can't have two things in charge in your life. Either you're going to love one and hate the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And when you think about the way Jesus talked, you might imagine what the next sentence would be, right? Like, what's the difference that Jesus is setting up? He must be saying, like, you can only serve, there's this phrase comes out, you're thinking, well, he's going to set up this difference between God and Satan, or this difference between God and sin. But listen to what Jesus says. You cannot serve God and money. And money is not the greatest translation for this. Some of y'all's Bibles, it says mammon. Maybe you grew up like I did reading, and it says you cannot serve God and mammon. Really, mammon and this Greek phrase that's sitting here, it just means stuff. It just means stuff. You can't serve God and your stuff. Now, how bizarre is it? How bizarre is it that Jesus set this up as what he wanted to say to people about their relationship with God? Why on earth is stuff, money, things, monetary things, why is that the thing? Why isn't it sin? Why isn't it you can't serve God and sin? You can't serve God and the devil. You can't serve, good and evil. Why is it God and money. Well, again, Jesus was smarter than you think because he knew, and this is huge, okay? It took me a long time to figure this out. This is massive. He knew that the number one competitor between God and something else for who was going to be in charge of your life was your stuff, was my stuff. That the number one thing that was going to compete between us and God, the thing that would keep us from staying on track all the time, the thing that would be so tempting to pull us in a different direction was our stuff. And he used, think about these words that he used to describe this. You'll love the one and hate the other. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And devotion and love, those are really strong words to think about these two things. But Jesus looked into our lives, he understood our condition, and he said, look, I just know how this works. Your stuff is going to become a thing that is tempting for you. Now, let me prove this to you. Think about this for a minute. Has your desire for something ever caused you to do something you regret? Like, don't raise your hand all at once, okay? But don't raise your hand at all. I don't want to know. But has your desire for something ever caused you to do something you regret? Like you just had to have it, and then you got it, and you went, oh no, what have I done? This for me is like every time I see one of those Amazon ads pop up on my Facebook or my Instagram or my social media, and it's like, I didn't even know that existed, and now I have to have it. And then I get it, and it's like, why did I waste my money on this? This is so silly. But it could be anything, right? It could, most of the time it's books for me because I'm a huge book nerd. And I see a book and I don't even read the back cover. Just the front cover looks shiny and I like the author, and then I buy it and I'm like, this was the biggest waste of time. And my Amazon driver knows me by my first name kind of thing because I do this all the time. But you regret it, and it could be big things, and it doesn't even have to be stuff. When we desire something and then we make a decision, even if it's, it looks like it's the right decision, but then we make a decision to move in the direction of something we desired, and immediately, shortly thereafter, we regret what we did. All right? Jesus knew this about you. And more or less what he's setting up is that desire for equals devotion to. And if you want something really, really bad, and then you go after it, that looks like devotion. Now, Jesus knew that for all of us, the biggest thing for that was going to be our stuff. The biggest ball of thing that was going to tempt you in this direction to kind of add devotion to or desire after was stuff. And so when Jesus said, look, you can't serve both God and your stuff, he knew that it was something everyone needed to hear. And if you take all the rest of the stuff he says in the next few moments of the conversation he has with the religious leaders there, he starts talking about really three big things that we need to understand about our money. And I want to share those with you for just a minute. It's three words that none of us are going to like. Well, you might like them, and if you do, I want to know. But the three words we're really not going to like very much when it comes to our money, and they actually influence why we do what we do. The very first one is discontentment. And discontentment is that ironic thing that happens where we can't be happy because we know what stuff you have and we don't have that stuff, right? Or I know what stuff there is to have and I don't have it. That's what discontentment really is. Discontentment is that seeing something, on the other side. When I was growing up, they called it keeping up with the Joneses. I know there's some people in here with the last name Jones. It doesn't mean you, okay? But it was that thing where look across the fence, look what they have. In other words, discontentment is driven by awareness. It's that thing where I'm sitting there trying to check football scores, and the next thing that I know, I see a shiny book or something that I need. My wife and I went out for her birthday not long ago, and we were driving down McFarland, and there was a brand new, I'm such a nerd, okay, but forgive me, brand new board game store that opens next to Marco's Pizza. And we went in, and the next thing I knew, we bought something. It wasn't even planned. We were just driving, and we saw it. That's awareness. 30 seconds ago, I didn't know this existed, but now I have to have it. It's just mine. I have to have this thing. That's what Jesus was talking about. This is driven by awareness, that now you know something exists and you must have it. And all of us are susceptible to that. All of us are susceptible to that. Now, the next word that Jesus used to describe kind of how we relate to our money is another one that none of us are, and it's this word, greed. None of us are that, right? Greed is something you can't see in the mirror. And one of the frustrations that Jesus had with the religious leaders so often was their greed. And the way they were so driven about their own stuff. It just drove Jesus crazy. Now, his definition, which I'm going to give you in just a second, his definition is kind of harsh, but you just take it for what it is, and I'll read it out loud and we'll talk about it. But he says this: greed is really just the assumption that it's all for my consumption. In other words, so I got this thing, right? I got this blessing. I've got this paycheck. I've got this whatever, and it's mine, right? It's my precious. It's that thing. I have to have it, and I have to keep it close to me. And it's my thing, and it's for my consumption. It was given to me just for me. And Jesus says, look, if that's where you are, and that's what you think, like, and I'm sorry, like, welcome to church, but like he says, you're greedy. That's what greed really looks like, is this idea that you've been giving something, and you've only been given the something for you. You've only been given the something for you. Now, the third word, which will make everyone happy, all the adults, my 20-somethings might not fully understand this yet, but all the adults are going to be super happy about this word. It's called debt. Doesn't this just make you so happy? There's nothing that can rob my happiness faster than this word. In my 30s and going forward. And I didn't get this when I was 18. When they're asking you to sign the student loan papers, and you're like, I got to go to college, and then you got to start paying them back in your 30s. Like, oh, what have I done? Right? I mean, there's nothing that can rob your happiness faster than this. And so Jesus talked. Here's the thing. This is what's bad. This is what's really hard. Okay, as Jesus followers, the Holy Spirit is constantly kind of like speaking into your life. All right, saying, don't buy that, don't do that, you don't need that, and then you make the decision. And here's the problem: Jesus now sides with the creditor, because Jesus followers have to pay their debt. And he goes, okay. Now fix it. I told you not to, but now you did, so now you have to fix it. And so, like, this is hard. I mean, there's nothing that robs my happiness faster than thinking about this. I mean, we've been in a season of time where it's been waxing and waning for us in this. This is hard, and this hurts, right? And so Jesus talked about debt so much because he knew it was like hanging a chain around your neck. It was like chaining yourself down to a weight that you couldn't carry. And so, somebody told me not long ago, and it's still a lesson that's hard to learn. I can't promise you that I always live by these words. I wish I could. And maybe you've heard them before, but it's one of those lessons I think we all need to take to heart. It's this: don't trade your peace for something that won't bring you peace. That's really what we do, like, right? I mean, we're driving down the road and we want that thing, and we think that's going to bring us happiness or peace, and then we get that thing and it's not, right? Because it actually came along with a bunch of other stuff. And, I don't want to make light of anyone's situation or any place that you're on, but this is just not a happy place to be. So let me put these three words on the screen together. All three of these words Jesus talked about when it came to how we think about our money, and then I want to read you the scripture again and explain where they fit. So any of these three words, just real quick, any of these like make you happy? Just quick show of hands. Yeah, I mean, like, discontentment is that, oh my gosh, the Christmas catalogs have come, and oh my gosh, look at all this stuff I don't have. I'm so happy. I mean, no, right? Oh, gosh, debt. I am in debt up to my eyeballs, and I have no idea how we're going to pay this back. Gosh, I just have such peace. No, right? I mean, but here's the thing. This is the thing, okay? We all laugh because we know. And maybe you've heard a message just like this. Maybe you heard somebody else who different than me stood in the same stage and said the same thing. We've heard it, but I know here's the problem. Here's the problem. You're gonna hear this, and you're gonna go, oh man, Drew was really on it today, and he told me what I needed to hear, and Jesus was really smart when it came to this stuff. But then we walk out of the door and we don't live that way. We don't. We don't take it to heart. And so, like, if I had a prayer or a wish for everything that I'm trying to talk about today, was that we would at least consider making a change in our direction. So look at what Jesus said again. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. You can't have both things ruling in your life. You can't. And the reason we talk about generosity so much, the reason we talk about giving so much, is not because the church wants your money. It's not. It's not because, we want to do something better than you can do on your own. It's because it's a principle that God understood we had to live into in order to properly manage our lives. If you take everything else in the New Testament, everything else Jesus said, everything else that's listed in all the letters that Paul wrote, everything else in the New Testament that says something about money, and you boil it down into one thing, two words come out. There's two words that can describe and boil all that down together, and it's generosity and wisdom. Take everything else that the New Testament says about money and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to live and how we're supposed to think about it is boiled down to generosity and wisdom. That we were supposed to be generous with what we have because God gave it to us, not because it was all for our consumption, but because he gave it to us as a principle for what we should do next with it, and so that it would not rule our lives, and that we should be wise with what we do. We should make wise decisions. A mentor of mine put this together, and this is not original to him. It's not original to me. It's It's just a general statement that we've kind of tried to model to you all and to share since I've gotten here. And it's these three words that in other words, when money comes in, like we've got this thing, what should we do with what we have? How does that work? And how is it the Bible says we should relate to our stuff? Well, these three words in this order: give, save, and live. You give first, and then you save, and then you live on the rest. And if you'll model your life this way, right? If you will orient your life in this direction, that you give first, you save second, and you live third, Jesus says that this is the way to make your money make you happy. That this is the direction that God has tried to orient us when it comes to our stuff. Give first, save second, and live on the rest. And the reason is, here's the thing, because giving brings joy. It does. I know you don't maybe believe this if you're on the fence about this whole generosity thing, but think about this for a minute. Jesus knew, when he talked about generosity, Jesus knew that we were going to be tempted to hoard it, right? And that's always the temptation, and to make that be in charge. But God said that in my economy, in the kingdom economy, this is not how it works. It's so much broader and more complex than that. And so the reason we give first is because what we do is something comes in and we have it in our hands and it's ours and it's so wonderful and it's so tempting to be the Lord and the master and in charge of our life. And we go, listen, I know you're here and I'm so glad that you're here, but listen, I have a boss and he's not you. And just to prove that to you, I'm going to take some of you and I'm going to give it away. Just right out of the top. I'm just going to take some of you and I'm going to give it away to someone who's going to, make a difference with it. That's going to do something in his kingdom, right? And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save some because I'm going to put some away for what might happen tomorrow. I'm going to put some away, and then I'm going to live on the rest. Now, here's why. When you give, it brings you joy. You get to see some, and ask some people in this room who give regularly, ask some people in this room what they've seen their money do when they gave it away. And what God has done in their lives when they began giving it away. Ask anybody. Don't ask me. It doesn't have to be a preacher thing. Look to somebody who's nodding their head right now and go ask them, how is it that this makes sense? Because God does something when we give money away. Then, when we save money, it brings us peace. Money in the bank equals peace in the brain. Money in the bank equals peace in the brain. And look, as someone who's had this wax and wane in my life, I've lived this out more recently than you can ever imagine. That there's this idea that when we have money set aside, it brings us this peace of mind that we can continue to move forward. And then when you live on the less, guess what? It brings you freedom. It brings you freedom. You can drive down the road and go, you know what? I could borrow enough money to live in that, but I don't have to. I could borrow enough money to drive that thing, but I don't have to. And when you suddenly live that way, you're not guided and managed by your money. Here's what I know. Here's what Jesus said, right? When you're not managing your money is managing you. I mean, that's really the centerpiece of this whole you can't serve God and mammon, you can't serve God and your stuff, is really just like, look, if you're not managing your money, then your money's going to manage you. Then you're going to, bill after bill and thing after thing and stuff after stuff is just going to filter in and it's going to try to take control and move you in a direction you don't want to go. And then all of a sudden it's like a whirlpool, right? And you can't get out. You're trapped. It's just drop after drop after drop after drop of something. Now, my 20-somethings that are in the room, all right, I gave the same message to the student groups last Sunday to my high schoolers, and I've never begged an audience to listen to me before, because, that's just not my thing. But I'm literally begging you to listen to this for just a second, okay? Take a snapshot of this slide, tuck it away from when you graduate college and you're moving forward. The sooner you put this into practice, the better, okay? Trust me. And look at the people who are in their 30s and 40s who are like, gosh, I wish I'd started this sooner, and you will get it. I'm begging you. I've never begged an audience in my life to listen to something I say, but I'm begging you to listen to this. Because if you will orient your life, the sooner the better, towards giving and saving and living, these three words, and orient yourself in that direction, you will live an unchanged and unfettered and unbroken and unsad life. I wanted to say happy and I almost said unhappy, but that's not what I really meant, so I'm sorry about that. You will live a happy life, right? This is how you make your money make you happy. These three things. And again, it's one of the things that's so important to us in Be Rich. We get to make a massive difference. We get to make a massive difference in our community. Most of us want to make a difference, we just don't know how. And so Be Rich is a perfect opportunity for you to begin to put some of these things into practice. And that's why we only ask for $39. It's not like, $39 from every person. We're asking about for 100% participation, $39.95. And the reason is because it's a number that's usually easily attainable, but it's a start. And what if you decided to take a step in the direction of any of these things, no matter where you found yourself? If you're not giving at all, what if you decided, God, I'm going to trust you just a little bit. I'm going to take a step, and I'm going to move in this direction. Or if you're already giving, but you're not beginning to save, what if you just said, you know what, I'm giving, but now instead of living on everything else, I'm going to begin to put some away. And then what if you decided to stop going into debt and stop spending money like water, and you say, I'm going to live on what's left. I'm going to think critically about what I should be doing with my stuff. I'm going to put my stuff in its proper place and see what happens. I think this will bring you joy and happiness in your life. It has for me. It has for dozens of other people. And when I talk about this stuff, I never want to talk about it in the frame of like, support your church. This is what we need to do. That's not it. The centerpiece of this is what God can do in your life when you put your money where he says it should belong. When you orient your life the way he says you should. Because it will make a difference for you. I promise it will. So again, this is Be Rich season, and in just a few minutes, I'm going to pray, and we're going to close out. We don't have a closing song today, but we're going to give you an opportunity to be a part of what's going on in Be Rich, and maybe use Be Rich as a way for you to begin putting these practices in place in your life. When you give to Be Rich, and there's going to be a link that's going to pop up on the screen in just a second, 100% of what you give to Be Rich goes out the door. We don't keep a cent of it. We've partnered with some really great nonprofits around the community. We're raising money for them. We're sending people to work for them on the 23rd. It's going to be really great. All month long, we're making a difference. On the 23rd of October, a lot of these nonprofit leaders are going to be here hanging out with us on stage. I'm going to introduce you to them. They're going to share a little bit of their story and what they're doing. But when you give to Be Rich, it's all going out the door. We don't keep any of it. It's not going to a jet or an extra car or something. Like, it's 100% going out the door. And so you can be guaranteed that you are making a massive difference. We've done all the hard work. All you got to do is be faithful and say yes. So I want to pray for you, and then we're going to close out our time. So bow your heads with me. God, I want to thank you so much of the people that are gathered here today for this opportunity we have to be generous. God, you've asked us to be, not because of some sort of act of desperation, but because this is the way we put our lives in the proper order. That you knew, God, you knew the thing that would be so tempting for us to put in charge, the thing that would be so tempting to make Lord over our life, the path that we can fall into so quickly that drags us away from our happiness and away from our joy and away from you. And so, God, help us to put our stuff in its proper context and take a step, not just to say, you know what, I've heard this before and I want to, it's so good, but to take a step, to just intentionally take a step to put things in the right place. God, help us to be grateful for those, for what we have, for everything that you've given us, and for the way in which we have an opportunity to make a blessing and a difference in our community. God, I just ask that you would bless our hearts with what you would have us do, and that you would give us the boldness and the courage to do it. God, we love you. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all so much for coming to TCAT today. God bless you. Have a great week. You can give now here. If you're brand new and you want to know more about our church, there's a Next Steps area right outside by that banner. And if you need some help giving, they can help you out there too. God bless. Take care. Have a great week.